Hey everyone, it's Zara and I'm back to fill my reading journal for the month of October. So diving in, I have what I read each day or how much time I spent reading each day. So it was mostly in the 1 to 2 or 2 to 4 hour range, but I did read every single day. Then looking at what all I read this month, I read 11 books, 1,996 pages, and my favorite book for the month was Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte. Then looking at kind of when I read books, I did a lot of reading at the end of the month. I was reading a lot of short stories, so this last week was probably the busiest, but I had a good spacing, a couple of books a week that I was working on. I read everything that I had started except for Cytonic, Wrong Place, Wrong Time, and The Missing Half, which I will be finishing hopefully here in November. I only read Kindle or audiobook versions. I didn't read any physical books. And there were some books that I did read both the Kindle and the audiobook, just depending on where I was at or what I was doing. I had 2 bingos that I completed. I didn't have a thriller, a 25 and 25 book, a scary book, or a book of the month. I did read more than 8 books, and I read every single day. And then the quote that I pulled for this month was from Wuthering Heights. "If all else perished and he remained, I should continue to be. And if all else remained and he were annihilated, the universe would turn to a mighty stranger." There were lots of quotes I probably could have pulled from Wuthering Heights. It's a very beautifully written novel. Then looking at my Goodreads tracker, I'm at 77 books for the year. Obviously a lot of Kindle books and a lot of audiobooks and a few Kindle books. Then I had 11 books, which is the most books, tying with March, but it's on the lower end for pages because I read a number of short stories this month. Then I colored in my reading tracker in this light orange color. And again, I'm at 77 books for the year. So getting into the individual books, the first thing I read this month was With the Fire on High. And this one I picked up because I was completing the Buzzword Reading Challenge, and the prompt was for a book that had the word with in the title. And I'm really glad I picked this one up because it wasn't necessarily on my radar. I wouldn't have picked it up otherwise except for trying to complete that challenge, or at least not anytime soon. And I really loved the writing. It was beautifully written, and the book follows Imani. She is a high school senior. She has a 2-year-old daughter, and she's just navigating, life. She's got obviously a lot of challenges being a, single teen mom. She lives with her grandmother. She's got other just concerns, life struggles. She's very interested in cooking, but despite having that interest in cooking, she's not sure if she wants to take the cooking elective that's being offered at her high school because the class culminates in a trip to Spain at the end of the year, and she knows that she can't afford the trip to Spain. But she's passionate about cooking. She's just not sure that she can actually do that, and figuring out in general what she wants to do with her life and what her future holds. I really enjoyed this. I loved the characters in this book. I thought they were developed really well, and even the characters that had their faults, I think that they were all well written, I guess. I especially loved Imani, and I liked her interactions with her daughter. I could relate to her in a lot of ways, even though, technically she was a, high schooler, and whatnot. I will say that I think because she, you know, had a daughter, and because, you know, obviously she's got more on her plate than the average high schooler, she feels older than her years. And yeah, I don't know, I just really enjoyed it. So that was With the Fire on High, 5 stars. Next we have Life's Too Short. This one is a romance by Abby Jimenez. It is following Adrian and Vanessa. Vanessa is taking care of her sister's baby because her sister cannot care for her. She's struggling with her own problems, and Adrian lives in her apartment complex. He ends up knocking on her door in the middle of the night because the baby is crying, basically to tell her, you know, hey, can you get the baby to quiet down, or hey, can you, you know, not be loud? And, you know, that's not what you say to someone with a newborn. She's just, you know, fighting for survival at that point, you know, trying her best. And because of that interaction, he starts helping her out more, you know, watching the baby while she, you know, takes a shower, or helping her just take out the trash, or do little chores here and there. And then they start to, you know, form a friendship or a relationship, and they start hanging out more and more just for fun. I enjoyed it. I thought it was, you know, a fun novel. I gave it 4 stars. My husband and I listened to it together as an audiobook. Then the next one I read was Night by Ellie Wiesel. And this is a book that a lot of people read in high school. I know that some of the English classes read it at my school, but my class, we read other books. I'm assuming we read something else, Holocaust related, but I'm not sure what, I can't think of it right off the top of my head. But anyways, this one is only 120 pages. It's a pretty short novel, all in all, but it follows his experiences during World War II as a Jew in the ghetto, in the concentration camps, and essentially, you know, fighting for survival. And it's a good novel. Obviously, you know, there's going to be things that he skips over, or there's, you know, he doesn't include every single detail from every single day because it is a shorter book. But, you know, he has obviously a number of things that he brings up, and I think that, you know, it still hits a lot of, it's impactful what he chooses to write about and what he, you know, includes in the book. So I gave it 5 stars. Definitely a recommendation if you haven't picked it up before. Next we have Wuthering Heights, which was my favorite book for the month. I gave it 5 stars. And a lot of people have the misconception that this one is a romance, and it's not. It's a gothic novel. It's full of, you know, revenge, generational trauma, you know, your father wronged me, so I'm gonna punish you, the son, you know, for your father's actions, that kind of a thing. And, you know, a lot of the characters are really quite, you know, awful to one another, or they're mean, or they're vindictive, and yeah, I don't know, it's not necessarily a book that you love the characters. It's not necessarily a book that you love everyone involved, but, you know, I just couldn't stop talking about it. And then when I finished reading the book, I had to, well, I couldn't stop talking about it. My husband was tired of me talking to him about it because he's never read it before, and I don't think he ever will, because he's like, I don't think I like any of these characters, and, you know, that's important to him when he's reading a book. But I had to go online, I had to read the Cliff Notes, I had to go to YouTube and find other people talking about Wuthering Heights, just so I could, I don't know, just hear other people talk about it, exploring the themes, talking about deeper meaning, talking about character development, etc. And so yeah, this is why it was my top book for the month, is because I kind of fell down the rabbit hole through it. And for it being a classic, I knew some things, but I didn't know everything. I actually didn't know a lot about the book. So in the story, you start off by following Lockwood. He is the new tenant at Thrushcross Grange, and he is interested in becoming friends or forming a relationship with Heathcliff, who owns both Thrushcross Grange and Wuthering Heights, and he lives at Wuthering Heights. So Lockwood, basically invites himself over for dinner at Heathcliff's the one day and gets stuck at Wuthering Heights because of a snowstorm. And while he's there, he reads some diary entries from someone named Catherine. There's also, other names that are written down, and he's trying to figure out how they all relate and, what's going on. And then he's also visited by a ghost. And when he gets back to Thrushcross Grange the next day, he is asking the housekeeper about Heathcliff and, Catherine and Linton, and trying to figure out what she knows about all of them. And the housekeeper is more than happy to spill the tea, and she starts going back, through 20 plus years of gossip and, her interactions with these characters and telling their story. So again, it's not really a romance. It's very much generational trauma. One thing even is evident, a lot of the characters have similar names. So like you have Catherine, who's like the main Catherine, but then you also have her daughter, Catherine. And so a lot of the characters have similar names, and I think that just plays into the whole generational trauma is, you're very closely tied or associated with your lineage, your parents, those who came before you. So anyways, I could go on and on talking about Wuthering Heights, but very much recommend it. This was a random selection from my bookshelf. I had a prompt in the back of my, journal that was pick a book at random, and this is what I ended up with. So very glad I landed on it, very glad I read it. I will be thinking about it for a long time. Then the next book I read was The Mystery of the Blue Train. This is a Hercule Poirot novel, an Agatha Christie novel. Just a solid mystery. I gave it 4 stars. In the book, you have a number of characters that are introduced, all, or some of them seemingly unrelated to one another, but then, many of them end up on this train journey and to the French Riviera, and someone is murdered on the train, and who happens to be on the train as well, but Hercule Poirot, and he ends up, offering his assistance to the French police to help solve the mystery. So, 4 stars, solid mystery. It's one that you really have to pay attention to the interactions between characters, what they're doing, what they're saying, to solve the mystery. And so they're just fun. I always enjoy it, and seeing it all kind of come piecing together in the end. Then the last 6 books that I have, there are all short stories. Amazon periodically releases collections of stories. These ones were all of a Halloween theme, but they've done a Valentine's Day theme and a Christmas theme as well. And they release it as just kind of like a short story collection. And I think this was my least favorite probably out of all of them. Solidly probably like a 2.5 star, but it was still, they were quick reads. It was nice for, cleaning my house and just, you know, doing other things while listening to them because they didn't take a lot of attention to, you know, follow the stories. And then since they're short stories, I won't say too much about them necessarily, but yeah, I mean, it was fun for the time. I won't go back and reread any of them, but first off, we have Hot for Slayer. This one follows a vampire and a vampire hunter that they are obviously, you know, continually interacting with one another over the ages. And the vampire hunter has not, you know, caught his quarry yet, and, you know, the vampire keeps escaping. So then now they're in, I think it's like modern day New York, and they come into, you know, contact with one another again, and the vampire hunter ends up hitting his head, and he forgets who he is, and the vampire is, you know, essentially helping him out, even though once he realizes who he is or what he's, you know, his purpose is, it's not going to be so good for her. So that was Hot for Slayer. 3 stars. It was enjoyable. Nothing outstanding, but it was fine. Then we have Falling, which is takes place at a Halloween party. Kat goes to the party with her boyfriend. Her boyfriend is not, he kind of sucks, but she ends up running into Briggan, and he is, I don't even remember exactly what mythical being he is, but essentially he's some sort of immortal type figure that people are just naturally, you know, they naturally gravitate towards him, and if he, you know, speaks out a command or whatnot, you know, people automatically, you know, follow it. And, you know, he says something to Kat, and then Kat is not swayed by him, and so she's different, and, you know, obviously it's a romance, so it's going to take place from there. It was fine. Kat really didn't have a lot of personality, in my opinion. And then Briggan, the narrator for him, I did not like. He's supposed to be, you know, some sort of like immortal, like 20, 30 something, you know, young body. The narrator sounded like they were a 65-year-old, you know, British man. And so it just felt like it didn't match the character, especially how the character was supposed to be. It took me, you know, by surprise when he started talking. Also, it had a very abrupt ending, which just wasn't enjoyable. I didn't like that. So 2 stars on that one. Then we had Spicy Little Curses. This one was probably my favorite if I had to choose one. It follows a cursed tattoo artist named Dax. And then you have Petra, who is a journalist who is trying to, you know, get the scoop, find out more about him and what's going on. And Dax's curse, it's a family curse that essentially affects him and, you know, the men of his family and the women they love, that the women they love die. And so it took place in New Orleans. It was very atmospheric. I thought it was fun. It was a fun premise. There was, you know, plenty of action to keep things going. You know, so I gave it 3 stars. I thought that one was fine. Then we have my least favorite, which was Space Vampire. This one it just wasn't for me. It was, part of it is I'm not a big sci-fi person, and there was, you know, a number of sci-fi elements to it, kind of like a sci-fi romance. But you follow Dana and Vlad. They're on an alien spaceship. Dana's a human. Vlad is like a vampire alien experiment. The aliens, I don't know, like basically create different I don't know, monsters to fight as gladiators for other aliens. And then, I don't know, Dana and Vlad end up on the spaceship alone. All the aliens leave, and they are trying to escape before the aliens come back. For it being such a short story, it felt very repetitive writing-wise, and I didn't enjoy the writing of it, you know. And then I didn't like how Dana was portrayed. I didn't understand Dana's character. They talk about she's a human that the aliens have abducted and more or less are just making a pet out of her, you know, dressing her up, and you know, she's just there. But it just didn't make a lot of sense, especially if these aliens are supposed to be smart enough to be, you know, doing like genetic experimentation and like creating, you know, different alien combinations to make these gladiator beings. Yeah, it just didn't make any sense for why Dana was even there, or why she was just, and she just kept calling herself a pet. But it's like, I don't know, it was just too silly, or didn't make any sense. So this just wasn't for me. I also felt like the writing was repetitive because she talks about being like a pet poodle so many times. And then like the little escape pod that they're, you know, hoping to commandeer to leave the ship, they talk about how small it is over and over and over again, and how they can't fit all the food in there over and over and over again. It just felt repetitive. Like they didn't have a lot to say, but they wanted to make it X number of pages long, so they just kept saying the same thing over again to get more pages, is how it kind of felt. So 1 star, did not enjoy it. Moving on. Then we have Beautiful Nightmare, which is probably like a 2.5 rounded up to a 3. You have Gemma and Caleb. Gemma is a sleep paralysis demon, which essentially she tries to scare people in their sleep, and then she feeds on their fears, kind of like Monsters, Inc., to be honest. But essentially, she's supposed to be scaring Caleb. Caleb doesn't find her scary. He finds her attractive. And then Gemma also is not a very good like demon. So she's, you know, failing, you know, her demon lessons, her opportunities, I guess, presented. And yeah, I don't know. It was kind of absurd at times, but also too it was funny. And so I had a good time reading it. You know, wasn't the best story ever, but I don't know. I had a fun time reading it all in all. So 2.5, 3 stars. Then we have My Boyfriends Are All Monsters. And this one honestly is, it was confusing. You have Lucy, who is on a hike with her boyfriend and her boyfriend's like friend, and she and her boyfriend have a fight. The boyfriend ends up leaving her on the trail, and somehow, for some reason, there's like a wishing well in the middle of nowhere, and she makes a wish on the wishing well that, you know, she wants a good boyfriend. She wants a boyfriend that is like in the Hallmark movies where, you know, they're kind and tender and, you know, have all these great qualities. And the wishing well is or is haunted by some sort of a deity, demon, something like that. I'm not exactly sure what it is. That was one of the confusing parts. And essentially he tries to make her wish come true, and he enchants this like town out of nowhere, and essentially she's sucked into like a Hallmark movie where everyone in town is very attractive and kind, and, you know, everyone is so helpful, and there's a bed and breakfast that she's gonna stay at, and the doctor is cute, and the, you know, everyone is helpful and stuff. And yeah, the story just kind of goes from there. I liked the concept of it, this enchanted town or everything isn't quite what it seems. So I think that's part of where the 2-star comes in versus a 1-star. I will say that the spicy scenes, they were something. And I don't know if that's my jam. And from the other reviews, this one I think was the lowest rated out of all of them. I don't think that it was a lot of other people's jam either. You know, think creative. Lots of creatures in the spicy scenes. But yeah, I don't know. That's all I'll say about that one. 2 stars, maybe 1.5 rounded up. It at least was interesting despite being confusing. So that was everything I read this month. So I hope you enjoyed watching. I hope you had a good reading month in October, and I'll see you back in a few weeks. Well, it'll probably be a little late because we are going out of town for Thanksgiving. So it'll probably be, you know, the first week or so of December that I will talk to you about what I read in November, and then I need to start figuring out what I'm doing for my planner or my reading journal for 2026. So definitely let me know if you have, or, you know, any ideas for what you're doing for your reading journals going forward. I'm debating keeping the same setup or changing things up. So I'd like to see what you have to say as well. But I hope you enjoyed watching, and I will see you soon. Bye now.